Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you. And tonight I have 5 reports from real people who've had terrifying encounters with upright cryptid canines, or Dogman, if you will. These chilling and compelling reports come from Michigan, Massachusetts, Canada, and even New South Wales, Australia. So if you're ready, grab your gear and let's ride to Dogman Country. Number 1. Dear Tattooed Biker, I live in the northwestern side of Michigan in Manistee, and continue to live in the same home. When I was in my mid-teens, this originally happened. It was night. My bed was on one wall with a big window on the opposite side. I was on the first floor of the house, but we live on a hill, so it's slanted and still a pretty high window, some 9 feet off the ground. Anyways, I woke up one Saturday night feeling really thirsty. It was about 2 in the morning and everyone else in my family was asleep. I was about to crawl out of my bed and go to the bathroom down the hall when I looked out the window and froze. At the very bottom of the window, there was a really dark shape. It looked kind of like the top part of a timber wolf's head. It was a really big thing, with 2 points that looked like ears on the top. I couldn't make out any other features, so while I was still scared, at first I thought it was just a reflection of something in the room. Then it moved. You know how a dog's ears will twitch and perk up when they're trying to hear better? Well, that's what this thing did. The 2 points that I took for ears twitched and then came back into place. And it wasn't a subtle movement at all, so I knew it wasn't just a reflection. So I immediately thought of the Dogman accounts I had heard from our area, and I got really scared then, so I did the typical kid thing and pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep without getting any water. In the morning, I went outside by the window and noticed disturbed ground, like a man or something on 2 legs had been standing there. There were no shoe prints, but what looked like elongated wolf prints. There were no marks on the side of the house. The thing that really stumps me is wondering how anything would manage to stay up by a window that's 9 feet off the ground in the first place. After all these years, I've caught a glimpse of a tall, biped canine on 2 occasions. The most recent was a few weeks ago, as I was in the yard mowing the grass and I saw it moving through the woods. I'm terrified that this creature might be stalking the family. Have you heard of similar encounters in this area? Signed, Shannon. Number 2. Hey Biker, I currently live in Massachusetts. I live near Boston, but was going on a road trip with my friend and his family out to their new place in the more remote parts of the state, Franklin County to be exact. My friend's name is Mike. We're both 17 years old. We got to their house and I was planning on staying for about a week, helping them get settled in and see the surrounding area. At the edge of their property, they have these woods that start off with just a few trees here and there, but after about a 5-minute walk, they get really damn thick. On the 3rd day of my being there, Mike's mom said she wanted to give me and Mike a day off so we could do whatever we wanted. At first, we just wandered around the property and hung around the house. But then we chose to walk to the closest town. This would take about 30 minutes. The town is small and there isn't much to do, but I'm happy just to be back in a place like I'd lived for most of my life, small and in the middle of nowhere. We talked to the owner of an ice cream shop who told us a bit of history about the town. Nothing too important or exciting. After that, we started back to Mike's house. We got back there around noon, and I suggested we go for a walk in the woods. Now, Mike isn't the outdoorsy type, and initially said no, but after a few minutes of me nagging him to go, he finally agreed. Even though I go out all the time, I camp and I walk trails, I'll always have my pocket knife with me when I go out like this, so I ran into the house to go get it. We started into the woods, leaving a really obvious trail. Like I said, the woods are pretty thick. At first, Mike spends his time grumbling things like, there are too many bugs, and it's too damn warm out here to be doing this. Keep in mind that last month was October, and after a while he started to enjoy being outside, and actually said that he liked it, and wanted to go farther into the woods. By now it was about 4:30 and the sun was getting low, but I didn't really care all that much, and we kept going and dark fell rapidly, to the point where I couldn't see very well. We had started on our way back, but at some point we got separated. I noticed this and turned the flashlight app on my phone, spinning around to see if I could spot Mike, and I couldn't. "Mike," I called out, "can you hear me? If you can hear me, say something." I waited, and a few moments later, off to my right, I hear a feeble stammer that says Joe. It sounded just like Mike, and I quickly turned in the direction of the noise and slowly walked towards it. I didn't see anything, so I moved my light horizontally to try and spot something. So I called out again, "Mike," and got Joe in response again. It was much stronger and louder this time. I walked forward with more confidence, but stopped dead in my tracks as I heard something big moving very quickly through the brush from the right behind me. I whipped around frantically and came face to face with Mike. At first I was stunned. I had heard him from the opposite direction. Startled and a bit angry, I asked him, "Why did you walk up behind me? Why didn't you come from the same direction as you called out from?" I was practically yelling at him to overcome my anger at being tricked like that. "What are you talking about? You were the one changing directions," Mike yelled back. "What?" I said quietly. I shined my light on him, and I could see that he was obviously pretty shaken up. "I heard my name, and I started walking towards you. You sounded scared or hurt at first, but after a few minutes, you started saying my name normally. Then you stopped answering my calls, and I heard you from behind me, and I saw your light, so I started running towards you," he explained. There was a faint noise of movement behind me, and I turned around to see a horrible sight, not even 10 feet from me. Its head looked like a wolf, like the kind you would see at the zoo. It was tall, maybe 6.5 feet. Its head, shoulders, arms, and chest were all covered in thick gray fur. Its legs and most of its stomach held a much thinner pelt. The eyes shone reddish. Both Mike and I both saw this creature, and we ran faster than I ever thought we could. For whatever reason, the creature didn't give chase, and we made it out of the woods without further incident. Mike told his family, who didn't believe him, and I didn't tell mine because I knew that they wouldn't believe me. Mike hasn't gone back into the woods and hasn't seen that beast again. The question is, was this a werewolf, Dogman, skinwalker, or what? Thanks for reading. Signed, Joe. Number 3. Hey TB, I was told about this incident many years ago. A group of 4 men in Michigan's Upper Peninsula were going camping and fishing one night. They were all avid outdoorsmen, big and buff men who matched the lumberjack aesthetic. They live outdoors in the boonies and always have. Their families stayed behind at camp that night, while the men took their John boat out to catch the next day's meals. They got pretty far from their families when they decided to pull off onto the shoreline. It was pitch dark outside while they were setting up their chairs and lights. As they were setting up, they started hearing something pacing the tree line behind them. They shone their lights and they caught red eye shine watching them. They're a little wary of this, but continue setting up. They've seen just about every predator there is out there, and they're alert, but they aren't scared. They continue getting their gear ready when they start to hear growling from the other side of the tree line. They shone their lights, and there's a second pair of those red eyes. Now they're deeply unsettled and begin to pack up their stuff. One of them keeps watch and keeps their lights between the two animals in the woods. By that point, both the animals are growling and making these huffing noises. They're almost unpacking the gear when they hear a massive rock fly over their heads and into the water. Now they're really put off and they start throwing things in the boat. They've got about half their stuff in the boat when one man screams and points to the tree line. They saw what they described as a creature, being inhumanly tall, covered in hair, very muscular and broad and big, but having a face more like a wolf. The creature is screaming at them as it's slowly advancing. The men are horrified and ditch their remaining gear. When they manage to get the boat out into the water, they all shine their lights back to the shore and can see the rough shape of the now two creatures, both the same height and shape. The men who are telling the story are literally sobbing and struggling to get their words out. They get back to their families at camp and immediately order everyone to start packing up. They never tell their families why, but they can obviously tell that something is seriously wrong. This is obviously a Michigan Dogman story, and these men were so scared of something out there that they went as far as to move out to the cities and suburbs. They were so scared their own homes didn't feel safe anymore, and they never went camping again. The fact that these families were raised outdoors, and these men spent 99% of their lives out there, living off fish they caught or animals they hunted, made this tale very believable to me. They were actually crying and shaking while telling the story. I'm not at all saying that men shouldn't cry, but big, macho, lumberjack-looking men all crying in front of each other, and me, barely able to get the whole story out, was enough for me to believe what they were saying. I don't know what they saw, but I believe they definitely encountered something unexplained. Signed, William. Number 4. Hey, Tattooed Biker. I have a story that I want to share. Back in 2005, a friend and I were walking home at about 2 o'clock in the morning, about 6 kilometers across Narrabri, which edges the Pilliga Forest in New South Wales, Australia. We were traveling from one friend's place to another. We were only about 1 kilometer away from home on about a 500-meter stretch of straight road. We were walking along a sidewalk, and my friend was pushing my BMX as we were just talking shit like we usually did, when all of a sudden, something caught my eye. 2 greyhound-like dogs, but much, much larger, probably twice the size. They ran out of the block of flats and jumped the brick mailboxes on the side of the footpath into the other side of the road, which stood about 3 to 4 feet high. Both of these dogs landed in the middle of the road and then ran in the opposite direction to which we were walking. As they ran further away, they actually grew larger and larger in size. While they grew larger, they seemed to stand up on their hind legs and morph into some large, muscular, werewolf-looking creatures, and in my mind I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. These creatures ran around the corner in the exact direction we'd walked from, and maybe 5 or 10 seconds after they turned the corner, we heard what sounded like a child scream. At that point, we both looked at each other, and I could tell that he saw what I'd seen, as he was just about to haul ass and bail on me with my bike. I jumped on the handlebars, and he pedaled like I've never seen before. I don't think he skipped a pedal for the whole rest of the trip home. When we got home, we locked the doors and the windows, and I asked him to explain exactly what he had seen. And to no surprise, it was exactly as I had witnessed. He and his older brother are Indigenous Australian. We explained the experience to him, and he said it was probably a yowie, which I believed at the time, but I've since done some reading, and this story isn't typical of yowie sightings in Australia. Safe to say, this scared me. It actually scared me far too much to go outside at night for quite a while. We told a few people about the experience afterwards, but most of the time people would laugh or joke that we were on drugs or brought up hairy man, which is a slang term for a yowie. I can assure you that this was the same thing we told them, and this was a completely sober experience. After the joking and carrying on, I pretty much kept the story to myself, only telling a select few people who like to hear paranormal stories. I don't try to convince anyone if it's real or not. They can decide for themselves. But I know what I saw. Signed, Baden. Number 5. Dear Biker, while I was listening to your channel a few weeks ago, a memory popped into my head from about 25 years ago. I can't remember what time of year it was, but it was dark out, so it had to be late summer or maybe early fall, because there was no snow and the trees hadn't started turning yet. I was driving to Edmonton, Alberta one night, and I was coming to the Hanging Stone River. I had just passed the Department of Highways yard and was parallel to the Hanging Stone campground when I noticed 2 bright reflections on the other side of the river on the slope of the hill near the top. This grabbed my attention at the time because I had driven that highway for years and couldn't remember seeing reflectors in that spot before. As I crested the hill on the north side of the river, heading down to the bridge, I was still looking at those reflectors when I realized that it was eyeshine, because I could see the silhouette of some kind of animal. The eyes were huge, as I mentioned above. I thought they were reflectors of some sort. I never once took my eyes off this thing. It was dimly lit by my headlights, and it was about halfway between the road and the tree line. As I was driving past this thing, I could see the shape of it, and what it looked like to me was a giant doe or a cow moose, because there were no antlers. It was sitting on its haunches like a dog would. It never once shifted its gaze. It just sat there staring across the river. I was looking at it in profile as I passed, and the first thing that crossed my mind was the sheer size of it. So I figured it must have been a really, really big cow moose. Then it struck me how odd it was for a moose to be sitting on its haunches like that, because it looked just like an enormous dog. Then the goosebumps hit me and I put the pedal to the metal and sped away. But as I did that, I was thinking of how silly I was to be afraid of a moose sitting there like a puppy. I can still picture in my mind's eye just it sitting there, staring off across the river. It looked like a giant dog, but for some reason my mind just wouldn't let me process that. So to me it was a big cow moose, and at least at that point in my life. I was curious about the Sasquatch, and I had never heard of the Dogman, so neither of those things was even on my radar at that moment. Every time I've told that story, I've always said it was a moose. So for your video to trigger that memory so vividly, I believe that I've been wrong all these years about what I saw that night, and I believe that I know now what it actually was. Thanks for reading. Signed, Jacob. And there it is. 5 true stories of what I believe to be encounters with the Dogman cryptid. Thanks to everybody that submitted their stories, and to all of you out there who took the time to hear them. Just a reminder that you never know what's really out there. So until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.